Welcome, Dr. Mungali. It's good to see you again, as always.
Thank you, Jeff. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
So today you're going to tell us about Sita Ram Baba, I understand.
Well, about Sita Ram Baba, uh, your mentioning his name takes me back to that time when I met him. See, Sita Ram Baba is an epitome of the ancient tradition of Vaishnava sadhus. He was a Vaishnava sadhu,
Vaishnavite Sadhu.
Vaishnavite.
Uh-huh.
So he was the epitome of the ancient traditions of Vaishnavite sadhus. And he is said to have appeared in and around Nainital in the beginning of 20th century and had lived at various places like Ramgarh, like Jiolikot, Ampadao, even Almora. And around 47, he came down to Haldwani
Mm-hmm.
at a place called Riyasal. It's a forest. And at that time, especially, it was a dense forest.
Mm-hmm.
Now the town has extended far beyond those limits, and it has encroached upon the jungle. So there are traces of the jungle which used to be at that time,
Yes.
almost a century back. So he settled there for some time and then eventually settled under a tree in Shivalik forest.
Shivali.
Yeah, Haldwani on its northern promontory is the boundary of Haldwani from west to east. On the north side is Shivalik hill range.
Uh-huh.
It's a tropical forest on the lower Himalayas. And so finally he settled under a tree. He wore a loincloth attached to a girdle of munja rope around his waist. That's all he wore.
A loincloth and this rope.
A loincloth attached to that rope around his waist.
Yes.
And even at that time, he had gray hair and gray beard. So you can imagine he was somewhere in his middle age or even after that. It's difficult to tell the age of sadhus.
Mm-hmm.
And all he had was an umbrella, which he did not use for himself, but to guard his dhuni, that is his sacred fire, from rain.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And he had a cotton bag in which he kept his very few essentials. He did not need anything. He was completely dependent on, he had actually merged with the nature.
He had actually merged
With the nature. Yeah,
with the
he
nature.
did not
Yes. Yes.
have any needs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He was a real renunciate. He
Real
was a real
sadhu.
recluse. He did not need anything.
Mm-hmm.
So he settled under tree. And after some time, his devotees, they knew him. He was very popular among the local people. And 3 generations of the families had served him.
Mm.
When you meet somebody at that time, he would say, my father used to say his father served him.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So
3
they
families.
built and they built a hut, straw walled with mud plastered over them and thatched with straw. He lived there. And he lived there, did not leave it until his death in 1982.
Acha.
I'll tell you later how and when I met with him. But just to give you an idea, what he told me once, that he had left Shimla
Mm-hmm.
while they were constructing the famous Shimla train, Kalka Shimla train.
Acha. Uh-huh.
The Kalka Shimla railway line was being constructed at that time when he decided to leave Shimla. Otherwise, he was living in a jungle there.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Now, uh, just think that Kalka Shimla train was built somewhere in the almost late 90s of 18th century, in 1890, 93, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, you can say that in 1890s, he was in Shimla
As a sadhu.
as a sadhu, yes.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And the information you gather later about sadhus, it is learned that he actually belonged to a princely state. And then at a very early age, he renounced, took vows of renunciation, and his guru had given him a name, Jainarayan. But people called him Sita Ram because he chanted Sita Ram all the times.
Uh-huh.
And you know that sadhus are often called by the name where they live and how they live.
Yes. Yes. Some
And in
feature
fact,
about. Yes.
it is a name given by the people.
Yeah.
Nobody really knows. In fact, sadhus have no names. I would say that sadhus don't have names, but people, after all, they need to identify him by some name.
Right.
So the name is given by the people. So he was, what his guru gave him name was different, but what people knew him as was Sita Ram Baba because he chanted Sita Ram all the times.
And
So he became Sita Ram.
Right. Yeah.
So if I draw the life sketch of Sita Ram Baba, all I can say that he told me that he was in Shimla while the railway line was being constructed. So it was in 1890s.
Mm-hmm.
And traveling to different parts, eventually settled. Before that, he had come to Ramnagar also, near the Corbett Forest. The
Which
Corbett
forest?
National Forest, yeah. Corbett.
Corbett.
The
Oh,
National
yes.
Corbett.
Jim Corbett. Yes.
Jim
Yes.
Corbett.
Yes.
He had lived somewhere there also. And from there, he came down to Haldwani and then traveled up to hills and lived in Ramgarh, Ampadao, Julikot, and finally came to Haldwani.
Mm-hmm.
That was his journey in that area, and he lived there until his last day. That was 9th of February, 1982. Now, one day in the winter of 1979, I was working in my clinic as usual, working with my patients. An acquaintance and a patient, he called in and asked me to see Sita Ram Baba, who was not keeping well at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And this fellow who had asked me to see him was an old-time devotee of Baba.
Uh-huh.
Now, Sitaram, I was in that area, and Sitaram Baba was there much before my birth.
Mm-hmm.
My family members, especially my mother and some other, they used to visit him at least once a year. But I had never been to his place. I had never actually seen him before that. I knew his name. Everybody knew him. Even I knew him. But it was in 79 that means that I had been practicing medicine for the past 2 years already.
You're still young and new.
I was still new and I was young. And so when I was called to see him, I took it as an opportunity to have his darshan.
Yes.
So having done with my patients, I took out the car and we drove to his ashram.
Mm-hmm.
It was a short drive, about say 7 or 8 kilometers to north and west of Haldwani town, towards the Shivalik hill range.
Okay.
And the road ended in a cul-de-sac, and beyond that point there was no road, a drivable road.
Mm-hmm.
And then a trek began. So the remaining part of the journey was on foot,
Mm-hmm.
which was not much. It was about, I think, 1.5 kilometers.
Uh-huh.
So we entered the foothill of Shivalik
Yeah.
and entered the forest. It was a narrow track. And then we crossed a dried river bed, a mountain river, which was seasonal. It would be filled with water only when it rained. Otherwise, most of the time of the year, it would be dry. So it was a dried up riverbed.
Yeah.
We crossed that riverbed, and from the other bank of the river, the track ascended on the hill.
Mm-hmm.
So another about a kilometer of walk in that dense,
Uphill.
beautiful forest. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we two were walking together, and that narrow passage suddenly opened in a courtyard paved with the stones, set amid the thicket of the tropical forest.
Mm-hmm.
And along one side, a mountain stream was gushing. It was a mesmeric view. I don't know, see, it's a simplicity or it's a holiness, whatever you can say. But I was really transfixed as I stepped on that courtyard.
Mm-hmm.
And there was that hut in which he lived.
Uh-huh.
It was a straw hut. The walls were made with straw, plastered with mud, and thatched with straws,
Mm-hmm.
grass.
Mm-hmm.
An opening in the middle of the wall facing me served an entry or exit. There were no doors, they were unnecessary. He never needed doors and windows.
He never needed doors and windows?
Yeah, so there was just an opening left there.
Uh, uh-huh.
Now, my companion entered the hut and gestured me to follow him. So, as I stepped in, right before my eyes, almost in the center of that 10 by 20 feet structure, was the dhuni,
Mm-hmm.
with fire burning in it. And alongside the dhuni was, I could make out figure of a person lying on the floor, covered in a blanket from head to toe,
Uh-huh.
and breathing heavily. I could make out from looking at the person lying on the floor that he was not a heavily built person, very thin and frail body. So my companion drew near to him and called aloud, "Maharaj, doctor aaye hain. Maharaj, doctor has come."
Uh-huh.
And he repeated it again. Then he responded. He responded by slowly pulling down the blanket from his face.
Uh-huh.
So I had drawn near. In between the dhuni and him, I was squatting on the floor, and then his face appeared.
Mm.
The face was full of wrinkles, with a white flowing beard and few remaining hairs, almost like jatas, matted hairs. And Jeff, what still haunts me was his eyes.
Uh-huh.
They were glowing. They were just glowing. They were shining like a child's eye. And he looked at me with a penetrating vision as if he could see through me. It was such an intense feeling. And then a very slight smile appeared on his lips, the corners of his lips that drew up. And he said, You are the doctor? Huh? No, you are not. You are not. Then he interrupted him, the fellow who had come with me. He said, Raj, he is the doctor. He said, no, you don't know. He is not. He said, Maharaj, he is Dr. Mungali. He said, Mumphali? Now, Mumphali is peanuts in Hindi, He distorted my name. The fellow who had come with me, he said, he is Dr. Mungali. And Baba said, Dr. Mumphali? Dr. Peanuts? Then he smiled at me.
He was a
Jeff, now I'll become completely devoid of words in describing what happened next. I bowed at his feet. By that time, he had propped himself up. And he has supported his body on one hand, one arm, with his palm resting on the floor. The blanket had dropped down to his lap. And I bowed at his lap, on his feet. And then he touched my forehead gently. And 2-3 times he stroked it, patted it. I had tears in my eyes. Now, love perhaps at times it needs no words, no gesture, nothing. It simply penetrates through you. It was such a moment. I was seeing him for the first time. It was his first darshan I ever had. And I was not myself at that moment. I had dissolved in him. Or rather, he simply absorbed me. Anyway, so he had some fever, he had some cough and some stomach upset as well. And he had declined any medication. But that devotee insisted that, Maharaj, no, I'll call the doctor. So that is how I had come. When I said, Maharaj, you will have to take some medicines. You know what he said? He said, if you say so, I'll take them. Okay. So I asked for some water. It was brought in a bowl and gave him medicine, which he took. He just took it and smiled. So, okay, you are happy now? I have taken it. Okay, you are happy? I said, Maharaj. That was my first meeting with him. I was with him for some time. And when I felt that he was not at least in danger, he will be all right, I said, Maharaj, I'll come again. Then he said, okay, come tomorrow. Come tomorrow. Since he had told me to come tomorrow, the next day I went to see him again with the same person. He had come to my clinic. I had told him that you come to clinic, we'll drive together. So in the next day, for another 2-3 days, almost every day I visited him. And he got well completely. Otherwise, there was a rumor already in the town that Baba was leaving his body.
Baba was what?
There was a rumor in the town that Baba was about to leave his body. So
He thought
people
he was
were
going to
really
die.
worried.
Mhm.
Yeah, he was about to die,
Mhm.
but he got well. And after that, say it was in the winter of the 79. So it was rather a short period, short time, I would say too short for with such a person, such a holy person.
Mhm.
Just 79, 80, 81. And in the month of February, if I remember it correctly, the date is 9th February, 82. In early morning hours, he died. He passed away. And
How long after you saw him was that?
just 2 years,
2 years later, then, huh?
2 years later. But in those 2 years' time, Jeff, he would not allow anybody to stay in his ashram after 4 o'clock.
Hmm.
After all, it was a dense forest area. And for the safety of the people, and perhaps for his own reasons, he did not really like it that people should bother him all through the day. He would ask them to go. People who would visit him, he will feed them, he will give them tea, be with them, listen to them, and well, bless them.
Mhm.
But to me, he would say, Babu, when you have done with your clinic, aspatal, he would call it aspatal, the hospital. When you are done with your hospital, come along, come at any time, come at any time.
Uh-huh. Nice.
So I used to visit him uh, always after the midday and would stay with him until late in the evening.
So
At that
dark
time,
when you left.
yes, and we were uninterrupted. We too, sometimes there was, uh, he had some junior sadhus with him,
Uh-huh.
one or two at times. So at times they would be with him too. But most of the times he would be all alone by himself.
Uh-huh.
So you can imagine what time it would be in our ashram with that great yogi, great saint.
Mhm.
And he would just, at times, he would just uh, start speaking on something. And that would be something which you rarely hear.
Mhm.
It was not that he was talking about scriptures.
Uh-huh.
It all came from his experience.
Uh,
So, though I had the fortune of being with him many times in that short period of 2 years, but just to give you, narrate you an incident. One day, uh, then most of the times I used to go alone. I prefer to go alone to him.
mhm.
So that day, I parked my car at the spot under the tree where the road ended and entered the forest on foot. I crossed that mountain stream, dry bed of mountain stream, and ascended to his ashram.
Mhm.
As I reached the ashram, there were two fellows sitting there. And as I entered, Baba said, "Look, the doctor has come. Now you go." They looked at each other and at me and to Baba. No, 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 no. They insisted, no, Maharaj, nahi, nahi, Maharaj, nahi. Maharaj said, now he has come. You see, he has come. You can go now.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. You can go. There is nothing to be afraid of. Go. I could not understand. All I could make out later that they were afraid of something or something. Why they are denying to go and he is insisting that they should leave now.
Yeah.
So one of the person, he asked me, did you see anything on the way? I said, no, I did not see anything on the way. Why?
Uh-huh.
What was there that I was supposed to see? He said, didn't you see anything in the riverbed? I said, no, there was nothing except for stones and sand.
Uh-huh.
So they looked at each other and then said, did you see well? Then I asked him, what's the matter? What do you want to ask me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then he said, well, we were Maharajji, we bid goodbye to Maharajji, and as we drew near to riverbed, there was the tiger sitting in the riverbed, in the middle of the river. There was the
Bengali
tiger. Bengal tiger.
Mm-hmm.
And we ran back to ashram. Maharaj said, tiger does nothing. Why you are scared of him? Okay, go back. So now we don't have the guts to go back. We are really terrified. But are you sure you didn't see? I said, I saw nothing. Maharaj then interrupted. Look, I have told them many times to go. The tiger is not waiting there for them. But they are not going. Okay, Babu, you just take them with you and ensure that they cross the riverbed. Take them and accompany them to that point. I said, now Maharaj has told so. Now you have heard him. Come, I'll come with you. So Maharaj said, now Babu, you go and you come back.
So you walked them down there.
I walked them down to the river, near the riverbed. From the other side of that track, the river was a few feet below, and it was visible from this end to that end. It was so clear. And from that point, they surveyed the riverbed very minutely. There was nothing. They said, I told them, oh, so it's okay now, you have satisfied yourself. There is nothing in the riverbed. You can go. No, please come with us. Okay, I said, okay. So when we had reached almost the middle of the riverbed, and there was nothing, I was walking with them. I told them, now you have already crossed it. Almost you have crossed it. Now, will you allow me to go back? So reluctantly, they said, okay. And I had not even responded. They started running. They ran like hell. And I returned back. I turned back and came to Baba. He said, so Baba, so you walked them across the river? I said, almost across the river. You know what he said then?
What?
He said, the cause of fear is not the tiger. It is ignorance. This is what he said. The cause of fear is not tiger. It is ignorance. And that day, he started speaking about ignorance and knowledge.
Ignorance
and he spoke for
what?
Ignorance
And what?
and knowledge. And knowledge.
Knowledge.
He spoke about knowledge and ignorance and about fear also. Oh, I did not know. Almost 2 hours had passed. And then there was a kettle always on fire, ready to turn into tea whenever he liked, or whenever somebody came to ashram, he would serve him tea. So he poured tea from that kettle. We were sipping tea together, and he was giving that sermon on knowledge and ignorance. the darkness was descending. Then he said, Babu, okay, come again. I used to have a small pen light torch in the keyring of my car keys that
Yes,
used to help.
yes.
He always said, Babu, be careful of snakes only. This area is full of snakes. Be careful of them. Otherwise, there is no danger. And when you go, just go stamping your feet so that snakes don't cross your path. More than people are scared of snakes, snakes are scared of the people.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
So go stamping your feet.
So you had a special bond with him.
Very special bond with him. And, I don't know why he just really, I would say, who he really loved. One day, as usual, I was sitting with him. Then he asked me, Babu, just you see that cloth hanging from the rafter? Take it down. So I took it down. He gave it to me. This is for you. That was a red piece of paper, cloth, knotted, containing something. I did not know what it contained. Then he gave it to me and said, this is for you. Well, I kept it. And when I got to my home, I opened it. It contained 2 Rudraksh beads. And the cloth, I don't know when he tied them in it. It was all covered with soot from his dhuni. Yeah. It was a red cloth. When I dusted it out, then it turned out to be red. Otherwise, it was all black.
Yeah. He'd been saving those Rudrakshi beads.
He had been saving those 2 Rudraksh for me. I still have them. And one day, again, he said, Babu, go to that corner. When you got there, you see in that tin, there was a canister. And he said, look into that. And I took out a book, a thick book. In that dark corner, what I took out from that canister was not visible. So I brought it to him. He said, this is for you. It was a beautiful book. Of many books that I really like, I appreciate, was this one book. It is on yoga. And it is a comprehensive treatise on the darshans, the Shad Darshan, the 6 darshans. And the book's name was Patanjali Yog Pradeep it was from Gita Press, by Swami Umananda Tirth. So it was its first edition. Yes, it was a very popular book after that. So it was its first edition. Perhaps in 1936 or 37, printed as back as that. It was the first edition, and whoever had read it and left it in his ashram had read it really thoroughly, because he had made all the corrections in typeset, in printing. I would say the book is now an antique. And Bharat, he used to hold a bhandara every year in Kartik Purnima. He used to hold a bhandara, and a big crowd went there to have his prasad of the bhandara. Now, it was his last bhandara. And he had sent his devotee to me that just tell doctor that I have asked him to come. Bharat, I went. I went there. There was such a crowd in and around the ashram. All the track to ashram was full with people. And it was almost like there was a mela. And when I entered, people were busy. They were cooking food, distributing it. It was such a pandemonium there. All people really enjoying the crowd itself.
Mm-hmm.
When I entered, he was as usual. That day, his devotees had dressed him up. He was wearing, hand knitted white woolen socks. They were too long for him, and his feet, his legs had become very thin. So it was not possible to keep them up. So they had tied it with the strings on his thighs. He looked very funny that day.
Yeah.
And a white hand knitted thick sweater.
Uh-huh.
Otherwise, he would be bare all the time. That day he was dressed up by devotees.
Mm-hmm.
So when I entered, he said, "Babu, Age, you have come, sit here, sit here." And then he ordered somebody, "Get prasad for him, get prasad for him." Now, Bharat, a plate of prasad, that there were puris, there was curry, there was, halwa
Yes. Yes.
of that Bhandara prasad. It was brought. It was placed before me. First, there was his seat about 4 to 6 inches higher platform on that floor where he lay, where he rested. And it used to be covered with blankets, 2-3 blankets at least. And he asked me to sit on that. I said, "Maharaj, no, I will not. It's your asan, it's your seat." Mm-hmm. He said, "I say you sit here." So I drew near and sat on the ground while he was sitting there. Mm-hmm. He said, "Okay, it's okay." Then the prasad was placed before me. And as I was just about to pick a morsel from that plate, he caught hold of my hand, said, "No. Today, Gopal, I will feed you. Today, Gopal, yes. I will feed you." He said, "Gopal."
Yeah. Why
he had never called me by that name. "Today, Gopal, I'll feed you." And he held my hand. I drew it back. Now we sat facing each other, and there was that prasad on that plate in between us. I was looking at his face. He had held my hand and let it go. Then he took a morsel, a piece of puri, and dabbed some curry in it and started feeding me. I opened my mouth like a child, and he fed me. I could not remove my eyes from his face. All the time I was looking at him. I even did not see his hand coming up and down. Once I looked down, then what I noticed that he broke a small piece of puri and just dabbed it in that plate, nowhere near that curry or sabji, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then started feeding me again. I burst into tears. Mm-hmm. It was just like as if my mother was feeding me.
Yeah. So beautiful.
I don't know. He said, "Puri lao, get more puris." I don't know how many puris I ate that day. There was no question of appetite. There was no question of getting filled.
Yeah.
I would always remain unsatiated. He went on feeding me. He went on feeding me. Gopal. 2-3 times he said, Gopal, le. Gopal, le. Gopal, here, take it. Gopal, here, take it. And I could see the moisture in his eyes. I was crying, my tears. I did not bother, I did not care who was seeing me in that condition.
Yeah, right.
None.
I was
Not
too.
even aware.
You had love of God.
It was love of God, yes. It was.
Yes.
Why one gets such moments in life? How? There is no way to tell. Maybe that is what providence is. It is decided by the providence itself. You experience such intense moment of love. In fact, calling it love, as people call what love is, perhaps it goes beyond the definition of what people define love as. It's so intense. It's so intense. Even today, while I'm talking with you, how many years have passed? Almost 40 years. How many years? That was in 82.
40 years, yeah.
40 years. But it feels like as if I am sitting not in front of you. It feels like I'm sitting in front of him and he's feeding me again. That was his last bhandara he had called me.
So beautiful.
I just don't remember how I returned, with whom I returned. Perhaps when I was driving back from his ashram, some people had got into the car. I don't remember. In a way, I had lost any connectivity with the world around me. It lasted for quite some time before coming back to in the mundane world. You know, if you take some intoxication, taking it takes few moments, few minutes, but it effect after that lasts for many hours.
Yes.
It may last for hours, isn't it? It was just like that. He fed me with his hand the prasad, the divine nectar he had fed. And the effect, it continues. It continues, you see.
Yes.
It continues.
Loving. Yes.
It continues.
Yes.
I can taste it. I wish I could share with you. I could share it with everybody. I hope even by narrating that incident after those many years, that prasad of that bhandara is being distributed to everybody, to you, to everyone. May you be blessed. May you be blessed.
Being nourished by God. That's what it is. Yeah. Feeding your soul.
So that is like, what else God can be if it is Sachidanand, Sat Chit Anand, the truth, the consciousness, and bliss. It is embodiment of that. That is Sakar Brahma, isn't it?
Say the word again.
Sakar Brahma. Sakar and Nirakar, you know that. You are familiar with these two terms in Vedanta.
Yes, yes,
The formless and inform.
yes,
God is both.
yes, yes,
Hmm? So it is the God in form of that body, in form of
yes.
that day, it was in form of Sita Ram Baba.
In such rare form. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's delightful. That's really, I can see it. Mhm.
See, the question of immortality. We are immortals. We are made of stardust. We are as old as the stars are, and we will never cease to exist. Our existence will only change forms, but the existence will continue forever. It is Sanatan. It neither had any beginning, so it will never have an end.
Mhm.
But in that journey, such oases in life
Yes, yes,
are, you know,
yeah.
where you simply become devoid of words,
Mhm.
speechless.
Yes,
Perhaps the gesture can reveal a fraction of it. If somebody is tasting something, you do not know what is that, but perhaps his facial gestures, they can convey what is it. Is it sweet? It is sour.
Mhm.
It's bitter. How it is?
Mhm.
It really needs no words.
Yeah,
And in fact, a word cannot do any justice.
yes.
Word cannot define it. There is no way to convey it in words.
Mhm.
All those facial muscles, there are so many of them. They are all, when they work together, perhaps they convey a fraction of it.
Mhm.
They convey the taste, don't they? So it was such a moment with me. And this was repeated after many years with yet another saint, almost in similar situation. I met him for one and the last time, and he fed me in the same manner.
Mhm.
Today, don't touch that food. I'll feed you. Bharat. This is all Maharajji's Leela. I don't know why I continue to be blessed with presence of saints. Oh, even while I used to work in my clinic, number of saints, many a times they would just walk in. They would walk in. Who sent them? At times I wondered, who sends them to me?
Yes.
There were patients who would come to me that we are coming from such and such village. A sadhu had come to our village, a roaming sadhu, a wandering sadhu, and he advised us to show our patient to you. So that is why we have brought him here.
To show your patient what?
They would say that I said, how you have come to me? They would say that we have been sent by a sadhu. We do not
Uh-huh.
know who he was. He had come to our village and he said, show the patient to Dr. Mungali.
Uh-huh.
That was their faith. Always left me wondering what is working behind this. Then the answer I arrived at was always one thing. It was Maharajji's Leela.
Uh-huh.
It was his playing.
Yes. Yes. So beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
In fact, I ought to thank you, Jeff, for brewing these moments of bliss I could not have really churned it out alone.
Mhm.
See, you are holding one end of the rope and the other was in my hands. So we were churning it. It was possible. I wish whatever was churned out is distributed to everybody.
Yeah, I, yes, I feel blessed by that. Yes, yes.
At times, the satsang has no meaning. It has no conclusion. There are no questions, there are no answers.
Mhm.
But there are moments, very deep moments.
The most precious moments.
They are the precious moments.
Yeah.
As you mentioned Sita Ram Baba's name in the beginning of the talk today, I really did not know that it would come to this point. We would come to his prasad. See,
Yeah. Yeah.
thank you very much, really, Jeff,
Mhm. Yes.
for
Feeling it new.
refreshing.
Yes.
Yeah, you really refreshed, really refreshed that divine feeling, I would say. It was taste, it was smell, it was touch,
Mhm.
all put together.
Mhm. Mhm. That was a deep feeding, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much.
Yeah.
I wish
Okay.
everybody really is blessed with this
Yes.
prasad.
Yes. To know